Perfect. So I'm Dave Ballard. I came to church here before I was born. So did Al Arnett. Steve Peters is here somewhere. There's a few of us right back here. So, yeah. So thanks for coming today. This process started when Dad was talking with me on the phone one day, and he started telling me a story, and he says, so I may be the only one that remembers this story. I always regretted not putting a video camera in front of my grandmother because I really don't know a lot about her family, and having her tape it. So I thought, well, we really ought to think about doing something like this. And for some reason, Melanie was crazy enough to take me up on it. So we really appreciate that. So our guests today, and we aren't talking about necessarily birth dates, it's longevity of being in the congregation. And we do have some other people that are in the congregation that have been here as long as quite a few of these. But for various reasons, these are the ones that got volunteered. Right? So my dad, Jim Ballard, may be the longest attending person here. He didn't start attending here until he was 3, but it's been a while ago. And then we have Marilyn Peters, Marcia Fuller Livingston, her maiden name is Fuller, Karen Hilliard Abrahamson, and Della Mergener, and I don't know your maiden. Oh yeah, it's Mead. Yes, I know your maiden name. And Marilyn was a Goff. So those are our guests today. They'll give a 3 to 5 minute or so, talk about some of their memories. And are you going to tell this? There's cards out here someplace. You're going to talk about that. And there'll be a time for Melanie will get some questions from you to have them answer. So I'm going to introduce Pastor Melanie. Everybody knows her, I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today, and just want to thank Dave and his father, Jim, for coming up with this wonderful idea and allowing us to hear these wonderful stories and memories today. Let's give him a hand for... Like so many people who come to me with ideas, I say, absolutely, but can you do all the work? And both of them said yes, and did a lot of the background work that I needed done for it going into Lent. They were wonderful and made it possible, so very grateful to have them. So I'm going to explain the format a little. We will start with... Excuse me. Each of the speakers will have their own time to just share a memory or two, depending on how long they are, 3 to 5 minutes each. And then after they go through those, I'm going to come through the middle aisle and pick up your cards. Those cards are for questions you might have. We prefer not for a specific person because the second half is going to be more of a panel discussion. I'm just going to ask the question and then let them kind of look at each other and decide who's going to start talking, and then back and forth. And it'll just be a discussion for all of us to hear. So if you have questions that you would like to ask of them, just write those down on your cards and have them ready. And when they're done with their opening memory, we'll collect those, and that's what I'm going to use for the rest of our time together. How does that sound? Good? In case there's any guests here today, bathrooms are just out the door and to your left. You'll see them on the right-hand side. And then we're going to have a luncheon together afterwards. We did flip. We were going to do that first, but we thought, wow, it would be nice to sit down with them. So we're going to have them at each of the tables, and you'll get to sit down at one of those tables with one of our special guests today and continue conversation. Maybe you have some memories of your own, or maybe they pull some of those memories out of you, and so we can discuss those things over lunch together. Any questions from those of you up here? All set? I asked for the best seats in the house. Those are pretty nice, aren't they? Aren't they? Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, they would be nice out in the pews. You just talk to those people about that tithing, and we'll get those in the pews. Wouldn't that be nice? Okay, well, let's go ahead, and we are going to start with our longest member of the church, starting here in 1933, is Jim Ballard.
My parents had been going to the Onondaga Church, which was about to close, they thought. And since that, the Onondaga Church has built a new church. I have not been in it, but it's been 10 years or more ago. But we started attending, and I gather from what the conversation has been, someone turned around and said, well, you could put him in the nursery. So that makes me think the children belong in church. And some way or other. Well, anyway, the next week probably, but I remember coming in the Main Street door, which was out that way. And I've got, what happened to those pictures? Somewhere we've got a picture of the choir, children's choir of 1937. And I can pick out a few of the people in there. One of them is Nancy Plenor. Maybe some of you would have remembered her. I have seen her recently. She's in memory care at Freedom Village, where I reside. And because of, we had supper together one night after I gathered that she was there, but it was very hard to talk to her. And she was very soon in the memory care. But that, we came in that door, that steps, and you immediately turned right after you got into the building and went upstairs. That's where the primary department was of the Sunday school. There was one large room up there. It's been reconfigured. That's in what was the annex. And my Sunday school teachers were Mrs. Horner and Mrs. Miller.
Aw.
Both prominent people in the community for their businesses. And we had many good things that happened. The other way from, when I could go upstairs, but turn to the left when you got in the door, and there was a small office for the secretary, church secretary, which was there some of the time, and a pastor's office. When we got upstairs, I remember there was one toilet, one stool for the children. The rest of the stools, rest of the toilets were down in the basement. Some of you would remember that. Mrs. Miller and Mrs. Horner were I really enjoyed them, and I like to go to Sunday school anyway. We did some wonderful things. But I was in the choir, and we got a picture of the children's choir of 1937, and we were sitting up in the balcony over here, the organ played from right over here, and she looked up and directed, Mrs. Stimson directed the choir. Sunday school rooms were up there. The primary department was, I talked about that. The junior department, as I recall, was in the annex. That was built on, and best I can tell is about 1918. That whole long, and I think the balcony was added at that time. We had weekly or monthly family potlucks, family night, and the tables were spread out in what would be the annex. Then after that, there's more room. The annex was not very big. It had the balcony up there, and there were Sunday school classrooms off from the balcony. And on the floor that was a shuffleboard court that someone had put. They probably came back from church conference because shuffleboard took off from Traverse City, and they might have been meeting up there.
So we've got time to hear from everyone else, and we'll ask you some more questions in a minute, but I want to get your handsome portrait first. We'll just hand that to you. All right, there you go. Good job. Go ahead. Next, we'll have Marilyn Peters, and she arrived at FUMER in 1941.
Yes, I was Marilyn Goff then. And it was early September in 1941 that our family moved from Charleston, Illinois to Eaton Rapids, Michigan, because my father was a physician and he had just purchased a medical practice here, which isn't done anymore. Like that. And the very first Sunday, we rented a house on Water Street, which is the next street over, and the very first Sunday, the four of us, my brother, who was only 3 at the time, and I was 6, walked to church here, and we came in that door there. When you come in, then I was so struck by how beautiful this church was, or still is, and the beautiful, beautiful window up there. And I was having to get used to so many new things, having just moved here. But I just felt this is a place that was really nice. I want to be here. So, yeah, the long story short, I came to Sunday school the next week, and that was the start of a long, wonderful, wonderful relationship with this church. Like Jim said, there was a door that went off Main Street too, that sidewalk went up to that annex, and that's where you went in to go to Sunday school, like he said. So there was, the sanctuary, when we first came, faced this way. There was a curved kneeling rail all around the altar up there, and the pastor had a podium that sat kind of toward the front, and the choir sat in back. But when they decided to change the church, they wanted it to face that window, of course. And I sang in that junior choir too, and we hated the robes we had to wear. We looked like British child singers, you know, and it was hot up there, and we horsed around quite a bit, I'm afraid. because our choir director was also the organist, and she sat down here. And, well, there's more to that, too. And, yeah, right. And then during my childhood here, the VFW home brought their children into our Sunday school every Sunday morning. And the younger ones particularly were real good about coming in and going to where they were supposed to and having the lessons. But the older ones seemed to gravitate downtown and cause problems and things like that. And that ended up being quite an issue in the church for quite a while. And because you didn't want the ones that really wanted to be here turned away. So I don't just remember how it was resolved, but of course the VFW home has changed from the way it was because all the kids from out there came to our public schools too. My Christian faith was nurtured by 15 pastors throughout the 84 years that I've been attending here. And Melanie is number 16. Good. One of the highlights I can remember of my growing up here was the Methodist Youth Fellowship. We had a large group. In fact, all their names are on a piece of paper out there on the historical display. And we'd meet Sunday evenings, we'd play games, and then we'd have a devotional time too. And in 1949, I would have been about a 8th grader, I guess. Somebody in our group said, you know, I wish we could do something special to really make a difference. You know, we got to talking. Someone else said, well, over in Battle Creek, they've got a special group that are bringing displaced persons over to the United States, people that had been displaced by the war, and they were living in camps in Germany and various other places. So we had fabulous leaders of our youth group, Bob and Marie Basor. I don't know that any of you ever knew them. You know them. Such wonderful, dedicated Christians that sacrifice so much, not only for our youth group, but for this project of bringing a family over. So we went to Battle Creek to this place, and Bob and Marie Basor had to sign that they would be responsible for the cost of bringing these people over. But our youth group really was excited about it, and for, I think it was about a year and a half before the people could come here. But we had bake sales, we had ham dinners. I remember peeling a lot of potatoes for those ham dinners. And we had rummage sales, just everything you could think of. And we went to what was called the official board of the church at that time and asked if the church could help us financially. And they said, no, we're thinking about redoing the sanctuary. We don't have any money for that. And that made us kids kind of mad, angry, I shouldn't say mad. And we went to work and raised the money. And you will see a photograph of the family that we brought over. It was a mother and her 3 teenage children.
Wow.
The mother was a medical doctor, and her husband had been, but he had died. He wasn't killed then, but in the war. But they were from Latvia, and right after the war, Russia took over Latvia. So these people escaped, and she told about the trip over here, and her daughter got the mumps, and they had to hide in somebody's barn for a while, and the Russian soldiers were terrible, and anyway, they got here, and it was wonderful. And so I'd like to tell you on a different time all about what happened to them after they came to Eaton Rapids.
So I bet you really felt like here we are again when our family came over from Ukraine.
Yes.
just a year ago.
Yes, and I've wondered what happened to them.
They have found a Ukrainian community up in Lansing with a Ukrainian church service, and they're all kind of living in the same area, and they both got jobs up there.
Okay.
So they're doing very well.
Well,
Heartbroken, of course. They still want to be home in their
yeah.
country. They still have family there, but yes.
So when you ask me some other questions, I'll tell you more about them. And anyway, I could tell you a lot more.
Well, thank you. I'm going to get your picture too.
Our wedding was right where I'm sitting.
Nice. Is that why you took that chair? They told you to. Our next one will be Marcia Fuller Livingston. She was born in 1946 and began attending at that time. Well, actually, probably 9 months prior.
Yes, indeed, 9 months prior for sure. I want to tell you about junior church because that made a big impact on me and a lot of the kids that were coming here at that point in time. So junior church took place at the same time the regular service was going on, but we didn't leave this service until they took up the collection. And when they started taking the collection, then all the kids got up and went to junior church. So what did we do? Well, we learned all kinds of things in junior church. We memorized Bible verses, we played games, we told stories of what was in the Bible in new and different ways. We had little pins and we could add things to the pin, like little pearl pieces that would be added to it for more and more of the Bible verses that we learned. And the interesting thing and the important piece of junior church is those Bible verses are tucked away in our hearts, and they come up when we need them. So teaching children what's in the Bible when they're little is going to be there all the way to when we're old.
Yeah.
And it's a support system. It's God reminding us that he's with us all the time. So another thing I want to tell you about is Jan McCree. And Jan McCree came after Mrs. Stimson, who became Mrs. Miller, right? Do I have that right? Well, they came because Ed was going to be the administrator at the hospital. They built a new hospital, and Ed came here to do that. And Jan came to the church and became the choir director, the head of the music department. So when I was 9, she was my choir director. And all the way through high school, and then my children had her as a choir director. My oldest daughter went with the McCrees with the Methodist Youth Festival Choir to Europe.
Nice.
And actually went behind the Iron Curtain when my daughter was 15. Then in 2002, my husband and I and my father, James Fuller, went with Jan and Ed again with the Methodist Festival Choir. It's not the Youth Festival Choir because we were old. And we went to Europe again. And this time we sang in cathedrals in England and Scotland and Wales. And it was glorious. So Jan and Ed have had an important piece. And it's wonderful that Brenda came in after Jan and has carried on that tradition with the bell choir, and it's just marvelous. So the music in this church is unlike what you're going to find in many churches. You're very blessed to have this. Yep. I think that's enough. I probably talked 5 minutes. I got a minute and a half. Oh my goodness. Well, hold on. I got to tickle my memory here. Okay. So the administrative board used to meet in my parents' dining room. So Jim's parents and Dave's grandparents, Dwight and Eva Ballard, were on that administrative board. And when they would come to our house, we had to leave. I mean, the kids had to get out of there because these adults were meeting around the dining room table and talking about important church things. And I remember that we always got goodies to eat because my mother would fix special stuff when the administrative board was coming to meet in the dining room. And so I got to know some of them. I think Dwight and Eva were probably more conversational with the kids than maybe the rest of the people because I don't even remember them. But we have a long history with the Ballards. And what's fun now is Jo Ballard is Dr. Meinke's daughter, and the day she came home from the hospital, Dr. Meinke let me hold her. So I have memories that go way back, and Dave and Joe and my husband and I have breakfast together maybe 2-3 times a year now, just to catch up. So what you're doing now matters, and it will last for a lifetime. So educate those babies. They're worth it.
Our next special guest is Karen Abrahamson. Her birth year was 1951, and that's when she started attending here out of the womb.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay. That's okay. This is as good as it gets, I guess. The church was founded as a church, this building, in 1845. And in the intervening 180 years, a lot has changed. It's changed the building has changed. The very fiber of Methodism has changed. But what has remained the same is the people. And whether they lived and walked these halls 180 years ago or yesterday, they have the same impact on people younger than them, the children, the young adults, the busy adults who are raising kids and taking care of parents, and the elders. Without our church community, without the people who are here, we wouldn't be who we are. And I can remember so many names. Many of you have relatives whom I remember as a child. Certainly all these people. I remember everybody. Marilyn was one of my ideals of what a wife and a mom was when I was maybe in junior high or high school. I've known the Ballards, I think, since God made me. Dave's grandmother, Eva, was instrumental in finding me a place to live at college. She drove me there to look at the home, look at the place. One of my teachers in high school was Helen Hovis, and Helen was also a choir director for the junior choir. Everybody's mentioned the choir. And Helen went on to tell me, and I was an only child. I was a farm kid. I was shy, desperately shy, and unlike now. And she made me realize that I could be an artist, and what an artist was. That an artist isn't somebody who does art; it's somebody who is art. She hosted a trip to Europe and included me. But many, and many other people. Jan McCree was mentioned. She was also choir director. And Sunday school teachers, Jean Robinson, Jean Sherman, Dorothy Sullenberger, Mary Minnick. You know, these people were part of my childhood that will never, and I'll never forget them. I'll never outlive the impact they had on my life. And as a high school student, as a young adult, as a young married woman, a new mom, throughout my entire life, even into old age now, I am by far the youngest, not by far. But I'm the youngest among us, but I've been here, you know, since 9 months before May 1951. And I just want to encourage you, no matter your age, to have an impact on the people around you, and know that whether you smile at them after church, or you say hello, or you pray for them, or whatever, you feed them, whatever you can do for the people here in town and in our community, wherever, however large that community is, it's honored and it's remembered, and you've changed people's lives. Thank you.
Our
Well-
next speaker will be Della Mergener. She arrived on our doorsteps at 1956.
The latter part of 1956, that was when, in January of 57, then Dick was in the Army, and we lived in Texas for a year and a half, or I did. But anyway, then when we came back, we started here. And the things that I remember early on, I've forgotten, obviously. But anyway, as I look at this cross up here, if anybody remembers Michael Winters, one Easter, when he actually sat on that, it was tied to it during Easter. At that time, I think the cross was up here in front, but he wasn't very heavy, obviously, but it was something to see him when you came in then. We used to have, or at one point, they had a Maundy Thursday dinner, or something connected with Maundy Thursday, and fellows in the congregation dressed as disciples and sat up here on the altar, around the altar, dressed as disciples, and they took the pose of the disciples all the time they were there, and then each one had something to say about the disciple they were. But it was an inspiring sight to see those fellows up there. We dressed up for church in those days. Hats and gloves, and the men wore suits and ties, and we only had one service, and the pews were clear up to here, and it was always full. The back part of the church where you see the exit sign used to be kind of closed in. They had access, and I can't remember how it was, if it was sliding doors or something, so it could be used for other purposes if needed to be, but it was close. If you had a child that was in the nursery, you were kind of expected to take a turn when it was your turn to stay with the kids in the nursery. And we had, I know there was 2 rooms, one for the small babies and then one for the toddlers, so to speak. And I remember one little girl, I happened to be in the small babies at that point, and she come up to me and she wanted to go across to the other room because her friend was in the other room and she wanted to be where her friend was. And now, this is something that certainly isn't done today, fortunately. But when it came time for the budget, couples would visit members' homes, and of course, they talked about the budget and always encouraged whatever. And they would leave a slip or a card or something for you to turn in for what you plan to contribute for the following year on the church budget. It was something that was just something that we did back then, I guess. I remember being in couples club. I don't know if there's anybody here at this point that was part of that, but young couples, we would meet once a month at somebody's home, kind of a potluck and games and just conversation. We never had any particular agenda per se, but the pastor at that time kind of decided that if we didn't have any particular reason, we really didn't need to have a couples club unless we could find some personal, not personal, but something connecting the church with why we were meeting, I guess. We always had a lot of fun, a lot of food, but I guess that wasn't what all we were supposed to be doing. And how many of you remember Evangeline Coyle? Oh boy, she was our organ person, and when we had, and all our potlucks were in the pine room downstairs. And at one particular potluck, she sang a solo. And you know Evangeline had a beautiful, beautiful voice. Well, she sang that solo. It was her decision to sing it off key. It was hilarious the way she sang it, to say the least. It was something else. We used to do a missionary week, and I can't remember. It must have been at the end of the week when he had a potluck or something, and you were to bring your contribution for the potluck was to outline or talk about some country that you wanted to, and then bring the food that was related to that country. Well, me and my cooking and my cookbook, I couldn't find any food that had anything to do that had any ingredients for that kind of country in my cookbook. But I did find a cake that was a Mexican chocolate German cake, and that's what I took. And I remember when our son was in the kid place for the kids, coming to Sunday school, and it was real cold that summer, and the kids' upstairs rooms apparently weren't heated because he had to wear his winter coat while he was in Sunday school. It was so cold up there.
Photo too, and then we'll get some.
No, not always, not when the church was full. They had to get here early. I think the church often filled up pretty well. And yes, you did come early sometimes if you wanted to get a seat. But my favorite seat when I was in high school, of that age, was one of the angle seats that went right across the corner over here. That's when before the sanctuary was turned, and we had one Sunday school class. Mrs. Horn taught the high school Sunday school class right in this corner of seats that came down the arch.
I like the idea of the curved pews or the curved rail up there. I kind of miss that. I wish we'd have still had that. That would be nice because with this, the depth is so far that it's hard to feel connected to those who are in the back. But what I'm hearing you say is how we solve that is we just fill the place, and then you got to move forward, right? Good, I like that. Another question I have is, can you remember, excuse me, can any of you remember when the guys dug out the basement? Did anybody say, "Are you crazy"?
When we dug out the basement? Yes, I remember it very well. We had the pastor down there, and we had a big crew of people. And when I left for college, I left a stone down there, and I never did find out how they got rid of that stone. We had Elmer, anyway, he would blast stone out in the field to reduce the size, but you couldn't exactly blast the stone underneath the basement here.
Lived on Hall Street, and I walked this way quite often. And at night, the fellows from the church would gather, and they'd start digging with shovels because there wasn't any other way they could get a machine in there, and they would throw the dirt out the windows there. And I remember Dwight Miller particularly. Now, Wayne Miller and Dick Miller are his sons, but he was a farmer, and he'd be working all day, and he'd come in here at night and do that. And I'm sure he wasn't the only one that sacrificed like that, but it was a work of love. Mm-hmm. And you talked about the curved railing. There were also 2 aisles that came down.
Nice.
So the congregation was kind of in a curved.
Very nice. Thank you. What did the teachers in Sunday school teach?
I would like to answer part of that.
Hold up your mic if you can. There you go.
Barb Pell and I taught second grade Sunday school for, I don't know, quite a few years. And one Sunday when we were there, for whatever reason, I don't remember why, we had the children draw, I don't know if it was pictures of their family or what it was, had something to do with the church. But anyway, this one little fella had a picture and was showing it to me, and it was very obviously a person that was kind of rotund here. So I asked him to describe who that was. "That's a pregnant Jesus," he said.
Nice, nice.
The thing that I remember most about Sunday school as a child, as a young child, was the music. We would open Sunday school every Sunday with a singing time, and somebody played the piano, and I think Mary Minnick led the singing. I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly or not, but I think that we learned a lot of Bible truths from the simple songs we sang.
Yes. And we still do that today. Matthew goes out during our second service and leads the kids in music. Wonderful. Now, realizing that we have some students here who are newer to church and learning all kinds of things, I think this is a great question. Was the New Testament wrote back then, or was it still just the Old Testament when you were here? I thought that was a great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. The New Testament was there also. It was all there. I think the New Testament, as a kid, comparing it to the Old Testament, it was like hope for me, because the Old Testament had a lot of angry things that were going on, and a God that was angry, and there was wrath and all that stuff. But then there was hope, because there was Jesus, and he turned it all around. So, yeah, the New Testament was there. It's been there for a very long time.
Great question. Thank you. What was Europe like in the 1900s? For those of you who went there?
Well, the 1900s would be the 1990s for me being there.
But we're in 2025, so for kids, that seems forever ago.
Yeah, that seems forever ago. So when my daughter went with the choir when she was 15, the wall had not come down yet, so there was East Germany and West Germany. And so going behind the Iron Curtain was kind of scary. As a parent, knowing your child was over there and knowing that there was a little bit of a danger that they might be stuck behind that Iron Curtain was really pretty concerning. But we also knew that they were there to do God's work, and God is faithful to take care of his people. And so I didn't stay awake nights worrying about it. As far as what it looks like, I don't know. I was over there this last summer, and it doesn't look a whole lot different because the buildings are ancient in many of these countries. We're a young country compared to the places in Europe, so it doesn't look different, but it's different.
Another question is, over the decades, being a member of the congregation, what are some of the positive changes that you have had the opportunity to experience within the church? Anyone?
Do they mean the building or?
Just any changes that occurred over the years. What are the positive ones?
Of course, way back, the VFW started coming here in the 1920s. And they kept building out there, and more people, students would come. So they'd bring their bigger bus for this church and for the Protestant children, and the other children went to the Catholic church. But I guess
I never realized that was one of the reasons why they kept adding on here was because of the kids at the VFW.
Way back.
Wow.
Yes.
I didn't know that. You just taught me something.
Very definitely. The first house that we purchased was what we called the Odie house. It was the house beyond the parsonage. That's the first house that was taken out. Harry Card and I taught, I think it was 8th grade in that house. And I see there were twin girls in that class, and I see one of them once in a while if I'm in town. But let's say it's the mission for this church to help church the youth, including see, we got no adult leadership from the VFW, exactly, per se, and it was just part of the duty of the church to take care of the youth, as I saw it.
Well, I'm so glad you guys did, because that really is the foundation that we stand on today, not only with our youth, but doing things with the teen center and other places, the schools, where we feel compelled by God to continue to pour into and take care of our youth. Go ahead, Marilyn.
In the 1960s, it became evident that we needed to build an educational wing. And so I remember Ed McCree was the chairman of the building committee, and my husband was the fundraiser, or one of them, and it was just wonderful. We had all that new big building, and it's still being used for educational purposes, but not like it was back then. For one thing, we don't have nearly the kids coming to Sunday school. People aren't having the big families like back then and all that. But the church has always been interested in supporting the youth and teaching the young ones.
Wonderful. Another question is, there are always snafus or unexpected happens that during church or Sunday school. Share your favorite, like a funny story or something that happened unexpectedly. Do you have any of those? Go ahead. Just grab one of the mics.
This is a personal story. I'll do it real quick. I was in the choir, and I've never been very tall, and for some reason, the sopranos were at the back of the choir, and I was in my early high school years, and I passed out while we were up in front singing. And the only thing, nobody could see me. Nobody knew it happened.
Nobody knew it?
And I fell. Some of you remember Max Williams. He was a rather large man. And I fell behind Max. And all I could see was the pastor going.
Which is, do you have any memory of either the Pine Room or a short story of a past minister, funny or serious?
The Pine Room was where you went for all of our potlucks and funny things, like the night with Evangeline Coyle, but that was just the way it was, I guess, to say. It was a place to have fun, to eat food, to get together in one place, or with all the congregation, not just the children or youth. I mean, it was everybody. It was just a good place to be.
Thank you. A couple of more questions, and then we'll head out for lunch, and I can pass these cards around the tables, and you guys can continue to ask them. What year did the front of the church change from the organ pipe area to where it currently is under the window? Anybody know the year of that? 1950s? The year, Jim, that they moved over this way instead of that way.
Oh, that was 1949.
49. And the wallpaper on the wall is still behind the purple curtain. I don't know if any of you knew that. In fact, I'm willing to show it to you.
There were windows, there were stained glass windows back there, but it doesn't look like it when I looked at it yesterday or the day before from the outside. It's covered. It looks like they covered glass. They saved the windows.
You may not have seen this.
It cost.
You can do that if you like. That would be awesome. Okay. It is stunning. I would like to have it open next year for All Saints Day. I prefer. Just hook that on. No, I'm just going to leave it down there so they can admire it. I'm just trying to get the hook. There we go. Isn't it stunning? Who knew that was back there? I found it one day and was like, why are we covering this? So the last question on
Hey,
the bottom of
Melanie?
that is,
Mel-
what year was the Pine Room completed?
You know,
Well, we had our wedding reception in July of '54,
Okay.
but it was done before that. They were,
Okay.
I think, about the same time that the sanctuary was turned around.
All right. Does anybody know how many times the church has been expanded? 43 times?
I'm just kidding. But Dad, back to the wallpaper. Dad was trying to say there's actually the stained glass windows back there too.
Yes, there is. It's that curve. It's underneath that curve.
Is that where it is? Okay.
Yes.
Those windows haven't been taken out then?
I don't think so.
Okay.
There are some windows down in the basement,
Yes.
but I don't know if. Okay.
I went through a lot of the windows when I did the sanctuary, the chapel upstairs. Those windows were original church windows, but I don't know where they came from. But because I went through a lot of windows, finding something that could be used for that altar project up there.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to have one more question. I believe Jan is the one who had the information on the organ. Someone else is asking. So come on up, Jan, and that'll be a nice transition for us to go out and eat after you share. Someone asked, was the pipe organ in the original church? And Jan sent up a card, I have a brief history of organ I would like to share. So those two perfectly. Go right ahead, Jan.
I was given this, and I'm going to need, sorry. There was a person who is an organist in the Detroit area, and they were doing research, and they sent us this information. The organ at FUMER, Eaton Rapids, was purchased for $5,525 in 1927. Which is close to $100,000 at least in today's money. The instrument was contracted on November 9th, 1927, between Ford and Reynolds, who were the Chicago area representatives for the MP Moeller Organ Company. And the church representatives, E.E. Horner, J.N. Seeley, F.B. Kaiser, I believe it is, D.J. Miller, and W.A. Horner were the ones who signed the contract. The organ was to be completed on or before the 15th of March, 1928. It says that also have the memorandum, and it says that payments were as follows: $1,350 when the organ was complete and accepted, and balance in 3 equal notes, and they were due in equal spacing following. So the organ has been in. The blower motor is still working. We had to have it repaired, what was that, 3 years ago, but it's still the original blower motor. And so I have all of the stuff on the pipes and things, what's here.
I have a card for each of you just to say thank you, and a Methodist pin, you know, because we used to do the pins all the time, and I don't know if you still have any yours or not. I stuck them to your card so I would not lose them. So if it's okay with you, Jim. Oh, you've got your Methodist name tag there.
Well, yes.
Oh, it went in your pocket. Sorry. Thought that would be easier. I'm going to try not to poke you.
Oh,
I didn't get
No.
near you.
While she's doing that, I
Thank
had a
you so
thought
much,
last
Jim.
week,
yeah.
and I kind of realized by putting the dates together that at least Dad and Marilyn possibly were here when some of the founders or the builders of this church were here, and definitely knew some of their kids of the people who actually built the church. I thought it was kind of a cool thought. Trying to get up and talk? Our historian, Chris, is right behind you. Where was the original church at?
The original church was wood frame. It looks like the congregational style churches that you see out in New England still, with the single steeple in the front. Built on this lot, which was purchased by 4 different couples that were part of the early church. And then in the late 1870s, the administrative board started thinking about a bigger church, and they contracted a architect from Grand Rapids, David S. Hopkins, who came down, and 4 years before that, he had designed the Congregational Church that's up the street. And they did the fundraising for this church at the same time, I should say, that they were taking the old frame church apart. They moved that. I assume someone bought it. They moved it across by the dam, so it was on Main Street, but up in the next block on the river. And it became a cooper's shop where they made barrels. And we have some pictures out there where you can see that. And then this church was finished in, I think the cornerstone says 81, but it was finished in 82.
Thank you for sharing, everyone. Show your appreciation for all of our speakers today, those who contributed. There is a table of more pictures and different historical data out on the table in the lobby. If you want to just meander into the fellowship hall, we'll get food at your tables. We're going to have each of our guests sit at different tables, so others will be able to ask questions, and I will disperse the rest of our questions turned in to those tables as well to get you started. Thank you so much for coming today. Wonderful to have you.
Is the 185th anniversary of FUMER's congregation.
Yes.
Started back in 1840. So you're
15
in a
more
long
years, and
line
we're
of
going to be having our
Methodists.
200th bicentennial.